All right, everybody, welcome to Thirsty Thursday, number 39. We're very fortunate to have Chief Pat Nichols from Boston Fire Department with us tonight. And we're going to go around the horn real quick and give Pat a chance to introduce himself and give us a little bit of his background. But Pat, I just want to get this out right out of the way off the bat. There's some things that just sound a lot cooler when a guy from Boston or New York says it. So if you'll indulge me just for a moment, I put it up at the bottom of the screen. Give it to us so we can just get that whole part out of the way. And then one other request I have: sometime during the webcast, you got to refer to something as wicked good or wicked bad, whatever. But that's on you.
That's wicked easy. I can do that easy, no problem. Park the car at Harvard Yard for a quarter.
Not that bad. Not bad.
So the funny thing is that I grew up actually in Connecticut, born and raised in Connecticut, and I have apparently a voice that, not a radio voice, but I have a voice that is very distinctive from the Boston accent, even though I'm kind of like a New York, in between New York, Boston kind of thing. And so I graduated high school down there and then left basically and moved to Boston when I was 18. So I've been up here since, but you can't get the Boston accent. You got to grow up with it, So I only got a little bit of it.
Hey, but you know what? That's a lot better than my Mid-Atlantic Delmarva Shorebilly. I can't even pull it off in any way, shape, or form. But yeah, thanks for humoring us on that. We got our guys here tonight: Mike Wood from Baltimore City, Bobby McGee from Ocean City, Maryland. Ben's going to be back on here in just a little bit. He's got to take care of the little lady at home, and he'll pop back on here real briefly. So, want to go around the horn real quick, and then Chief Nichols are going to pass it back to you after they go around the horn. Give us a little intro, a little bit of your background, and we're going to talk about some man versus machine. So, Bobby, it's on you.
Well, hello, everybody. Chief Nichols, it's great to have you on here. Just so you know, everyone's throwing man versus machine around all over the country, but Chief Nichols was probably the instrumental first person to kind of put that together as a program to go out with. You were with Mark Gregory at the time, weren't you, Chief? I think, right. So we got to give the due credit where it is that a lot of these minor the rescue things with unusual things was kind of missed in the fire service, and those guys put it together, and we're greatly indebted to them. So every time we say man versus machine around here, I always think about you, Chief Nichols, and I think about Mark Gregory up in New York and stuff like that. But I definitely I thought that you could never say New York and Boston in the same sentence. That was pretty amazing. So I'll turn it over to Mike. Hi, Mike.
Hey, guys. Hey, Chief. I'm glad you're on and looking forward to it. My name is Michael Wood, and I've been up with Baltimore for some years now, going on 18. And I've heard a lot about you. And it's actually your subject matter has been brought up many, many times, not only in Baltimore, but also down here in Ocean City. And there is a definite need for that type of knowledge. So I'm really looking forward to it. And I'll kick it back to Trevor, and we'll get moving.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. Ben just texted me, and he's actually finishing up his hair and nail appointment right now, so he should be back on here in a few minutes. But Chief, we were talking just before the show that even though a lot of departments like your size and the size of Mike's, and even in Ocean City, we have some special operations capability, but it's not a full-time staffed unit. But the way that man versus machine, that my first exposure to it was, regardless of the size and scope of your department, that there was something for you to get started on, regardless if you were engine-centric, truck-centric, even on an ambulance, whatever the case is. And you made sure that you got the point across that don't show up and just be a well-dressed spectator with a front row seat. So to that end, Chief Nichols, if you want to go ahead and give us a little intro and then kind of take it from there based on what we just talked about.
Sure. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. And the kudos has to go to Mark Gregory. It's all of our program put together, all of our experiences, and but it was his idea. So I'm going to give the credit to where the credit's due. we all and when we do this man and machine program, we probably learn something every time we go and present it. People have things to offer, their experiences and things like that, and we'll put that into the program. We'll tweak it, and those little tidbits that somebody can give us, and that's what the fire service should be all about: sharing ideas. I mean, really, that's what the kitchen table is all about, right? Sharing, what we saw, what we did last tour, to what's going on. I'm been a Boston on the Boston Fire Department for just shy of 30, like literally 2 weeks shy of 36 years. Currently a district chief in one of our special ops districts. We have 2 of them, and I have most of my experience has been on a ladder truck. I guess, Mike, you would appreciate that. I did a few years as a fireman helper. I respectfully call the engine guys. And when I was first appointed, but since then I've been on a truck, special ops trucks, rescue 2 for a little bit. And then a towel out of 10, which is part of the special ops. We do in Boston a task force, if you will. It's 5 companies in one division, and 4 really in another division that are tech rescue trained. 4 of the 5 are manned, and we have a special ops truck, and then 3 of the 4 are manned permanently in the other division, and 1 has a special ops truck. And that's how we run it. If it's really a large event, everybody goes. It takes a lot. I've been fortunate enough to be starting as a volunteer fireman in Connecticut where I was in high school. That's kind of started my roots down there, and then been fortunate enough to be on the Massachusetts or the New England Urban Search and Rescue team. So I've been able to just try to absorb as best I can with all the people that I've been surrounded by, fortunate been surrounded by, and just try to get as much knowledge out of them as I can. So I've been fortunate in that respect. Right now I'm in District 9. I've been there for 4 years now, I think. And brand new firehouse, which is kind of cool because it's kind of a state of art firehouse, well thought out for the cancer prevention and warm, hot, cold zones and whatnot. So that's kind of going to wind down my career in a brand new house. Kind of spoiled with that, As far as the program goes, we really emphasize the ability for any engine or truck or any unit to get on the scene to be able to start an operation. It could be as easy as unscrewing the spark plug on a snowblower. Trevor, I know you're probably not familiar right now with a snowblower. You're probably not going to run into it, but up this way we do. And it might be as easy as releasing the compression on the engine and just giving you enough free ability to move the engine and move the auger a little bit, and that's all you need, and how much we've always been trained, when we have railroad incidents, how much do you have to lift the train up? Just enough. Give firemen enough time. We can jack a train up 10 feet off the ground, but there's no need for that. And it's the same with the any kind of man and machine or anything like that. You just got to move it enough to get the extrication complete. It's been a great ride. It's been a lot of fun, a lot of education, a lot of we've got a lot of people who I feel very fortunate that a lot of people reach out and said it's one of the best classes. And it's not certainly me. It's the team we have around us presenting it, but it's kind of rewarding in that respect.
Absolutely, and all the points are well taken. Just before the show, I was also saying that even though my heart's on the truck, where I am now, small department, we're very engine centric, but we
Yeah.
have a specialized bag just for man versus machine, and a specialized compartment for residential rescues and those unique things. So it's amazing when the firefighters actually kind of get out of their own lane a little bit and realize the capabilities they have, certainly limitations also, but what they can do in that very beginning phase. And Pat, you had talked about obviously Mark Gregory being exceptionally instrumental, and Bobby, you remember this from when we first started doing the Fools Hot training down in Ocean City and combining it with the State Firemen's Association training. Is that the first group that came down? Mark was one of the first people came down and brought some of his cadre of instructors with him, but was the PL Vulcan. And they were instrumental in really getting our Fools-based hot training off the ground in Ocean City. And Pat, when it swings back to you, if you could just kind of give us a little bit of the background of Pete Lund and the PL Vulcan, with that. But again, Mark's definitely been a huge cornerstone of this process, and you guys have done this class all throughout the country and probably further, but it certainly resonates at all levels. So with that, Pat, you mind talking a little bit about PL Vulcan, and then kind of easing us in a little bit to where to get started if I'm on that first due engine company or first due even the first due medic unit, whatever the case is, and we come across these things, where our thought processes should start.
Sure. So PL Vulcan, it actually started with Pete Lund, who was a very well respected lieutenant on the FDNY, and started a training company in the New York area. But they obviously had gone into different areas, and it was Vulcan Training Concepts. And his nickname was the Vulcan, the God of Fire. That was a joke around the rescue too in New York City, where he's assigned. After 9/11, like so many others, he had to he wasn't working, so he was around. But after all of the recovery and everything like that, he basically had to retire. I mean, I didn't have to retire, I suppose, but he retired from the FDNY and was still a volunteer out on Long Island, and had a fatal heart attack or a fatal heart incident at an incident in his volunteer department in Long Island. I had just joined that team, and Mark and I became friendly because of a Jerry Dewan, who was a Boston, his Boston resident, ended up getting on in New York City, but I came on with his brother in 1986. His uncle was on the job, so it was Dewans were like a name, a traditional name in the city of Boston for the fire department. Became friendly with Jerry, knowing Jerry. Mark had allowed him or let him stay at his house quite a few summers. 9/11, unfortunately, Jerry succumbed to his injuries in one of the collapses of the towers. So Mark then came up to Boston to give the eulogy for Jerry when they had the funeral, and that's where I met him, and then that's what kind of that part of the bond started, and that's a long story, but what happens is that it's all the relationships that you make as you go along through your career that help you out as you go along, and. He introduced me to Pete Lund and asked me if I would come on board, and we did. And I think within, months of me saying yes, he succumbed. Pete succumbed. So we ended up obviously being disappointed and obviously saddened by his loss. We put everything on hold. later that year, later on, we decided that we would honor him by continuing with what his passion was, which was teaching. And we ended up asking the widow if it was okay if we could use use his initials PL in the PL Vulcan. And so that's how that name was resurrected and came along. And we were doing a lot of truck work because that's what our backgrounds was. Mark Gregory was a lieutenant at the time on 111. He, like I, had been pretty much truck guys are pretty much our career. He's currently a captain at Ladder 176. And he and then we just had a brainstorm, probably over adult beverages after a class, and he said, I got this idea, let's, and then we just went with it. And and again, it's, everybody's putting their heads in. We have people on Worcester, Massachusetts Fire Department, several in New York City. We had one in Baltimore. He has since retired. And we have guys in Miami, Austin, Texas, Kentucky near Cincinnati. And you get all of those experiences and you put them all in a pot and you stir it up and you spit out program and you spit out a bunch of experiences and a bunch of techniques that really work well and not getting complicated. Certainly there are, some extremely complicated entrapments, but most of them, without overthinking them, can be done by a set of hand tools, ratchet sets, maybe some torches, maybe some, and just some thinking out of the box. For instance, we do a ring removal. Things like the ring cutter that was pretty much standard in our kits, which was the hand cranked tool that you would slide under the finger, and people would be uncomfortable with it because it's, by the time they get to you, they're probably swollen fingers and very painful, and now you have to slide something in between them. We've gone with the Dremel tool and utilize things like kitchen spoons and forks and things like that to put a buffer between the skin and the running blade, and then added a little bit of water to that for a cooling effect. Almost, it's funny, we laugh because every class we have, whether it's a RIT class or a man in a machine class or some class, we always say at the end of the day, it's like, you call us because you're going to have something in the next day or two. And we were down on Long Island, and same thing. We gave the class on Saturday night, somebody comes, knocks on the door. I got a ring on my finger. My wife can't get it off her finger. We've tried everything. And again, by the time they get to you, it's been hours, probably, maybe even days. And that particular fire department said, well, we know that the town next to us took a class. You should go see them. And they gave them directions to the class, to the next fire department, next fire district over. And sure enough, they did everything we showed them with the ring removal, and they were able to get the ring off with no injuries. And so again, it's funny because those are few and far between, but they're almost routine. But they could be so much better for not only for our image as in the fire service and the your fire department itself, but also for the public, obviously, and your patient, your people that you're working with. If you could do it better, easier, save somebody's ring. I remember prior to all of this going on, when I was a young lieutenant it was a very busy ladder truck, but we we never had any training on man and machine. It was really much, well, try your best, call for the rescue. And with all due respect to the rescue guys, and they showed up, and they start cutting the ring, and diamonds are popping off, and I'm like, oh my God, gee, there's got to be a better way than this, And I'm probably exaggerating a little bit, but they were. It didn't seem like I felt like it could have gone better, and then the more we learn, the more we experience these things. It's like, yeah, there is a better way to do it, and it's not. We always say it's not rocket scientists. You don't have to be. Even the engine guys can do this. And I'm just kidding with that too, of course. But we have. It's their basic tools. They're basic tools, and we get involved into, we recommend some band saws for certain incidents and things like that. But most of the time, the fire department that hosts us don't usually have to buy anything beyond what they already have. They put it in a bag. They put everything they have. They put it in a quick attack, man versus machine kit, if you will, and then that's it. And we add a few things, like things that maybe people don't think about right away, which is, you run even a Dremel tool, which is, a hobby tool, but that generates heat, so you maybe introduce water to try to cool it, whatever you're cutting, to try to prevent any kind of injuries. We had somebody reached out to us a few, I don't know, this year, maybe 6 weeks ago, maybe 2 months ago, and they showed us some injuries that the ER did. They were using a tool, but no, a Dremel tool or similar tool, but they used no water. And so there was some blistering on the finger for this woman, and her husband happened to be a fireman, and happened to take this class. And, of course, we see the pictures, we see the story, and it's like, okay, it's too bad that, maybe the fire department didn't get involved. And that happens. We had several, it was funny. They come in groups, you kind of, it's like, oh, we're going to have you have a fire, and then you have like 3 fires in a row kind of thing, and it was kind of like, for us in Boston, we had 3 incidents that the hospital called us, the ER, and called us to go to the ER, and they gave up, basically. They said, well, you guys must know how to do this. And they're not always rings on fingers. We'll just put it that way. And they could be, any place. And they kind of were like, yeah, we don't know what to do with this. I'm like, okay, well, we'll do our best. And it was, and they were very appreciative, because we come in there, professionals, and, help the patient. And we were out of there in less than an hour. And it was a large bolt kind of thing. So you can use your imaginations.
Chief, we're a little slow. Can you describe that in detail for us, please? No, I'm just
kidding. We'll put it this way. I was in command, and the guy operating the tool gets flowers from the person now. So we'll just, yeah.
That's very nice. That's sweet.
Yeah.
And it's funny. It's funny you say that, because that's one of the things when I know when Mark was coming down and teaching the class in Ocean City, and he would always say, slow is smooth and smooth is fast, but don't be surprised if these skill sets don't take you out of your comfort zone. And Mike, I know you've had the same thing in Baltimore City with some of your companies, especially Rescue One, that you might find yourself in a set of surgical scrubs at shock trauma, taking off a device, somewhere. And I know you Baltimore and Boston are somewhat similar in size and population, that type of thing. But Chief Nichols, that's a great point. Is that once you have developed these skill sets, it might not just be responding to an industrial site for somebody caught in a press or a lathe, or going to a residential rescue. I mean, you might be going in to assist somebody at a medical place. So, that's how often does that happen with you guys between Mike and Pat? What's the frequency that you get those kind of calls?
Go ahead, Chief.
Well, I would say, I mean, in the 5 years I've been in District 9, I did it twice in 3 months. We haven't had any that I was working for, but I happened to catch three of them. I had two of them in the 3 months. There was probably, they're very rare. And it was funny because it was during COVID. It was, everybody, the world's crazy, and you have to go in there. We're dealing with doctors. We're dealing with nurses and doctors and specialists and all of that. And if you got to go in there, professionally and be able to get things done. And I had to have a conversation with one of the doctors because he looked at the bag and he was like, "Those tools, they're not sterilized." And I'm like, "Well, we're not breaking skin, so we're not operating. That's the whole goal of this is not to break the skin." And he was, we had a conversation, and he was more comfortable about what we did, and what we were going to do, and what the process was going to entail. So fortunately, it doesn't happen too often, but and again, those are the conversations you have to have. It's real difficult to have on the rig on the way to the incident. Those are things that you kind of have to, practice with, and try to. And the nice thing about man in the machine is that that whole process, you can train on a ring on a finger. It's the same concept as anything else, as far as something else engaged in a object.
And for you guys, but before you receive these calls to go to, whether it's an emergency room, an OR suite, whatever the case is, was this something that there was any kind of previous communication, or was this on the fly? You had to figure it out, and then based on that kind of stuff between you and Mike, would you recommend maybe having that sit down? I know that we got all the egos and attitudes and alpha dogs with surgeons and this, that, and the other, like you're talking about. But was there any pre-planning at all in this, or again, was it just kind of let's get this done, let's be professional, and then go from there? And what was your follow-up?
Well, in Boston, it was one of only. I remember one probably 10 years prior, and there might have been other incidents, but it wasn't shared if there was anything. And it might have been scattered here and there, but they were so few and far between. Boston ended up doing a man in the machine program for all the tech rescue companies, actually specifically the rescue companies, because they were using that as an advanced skill for tech rescue. So all the guys, or most of the guys on the rescue that responded had this program. And again, it doesn't make any difference what's stuck where. The technique is basically the same. You have to understand what the different metals. You're not going to cut titanium like really easy, if at all. You're probably better breaking it. Recognizing that kind of thing. Some of the thicker metals, heavier bolts maybe, or something thicker that you needed to remove. It's going to take more time, but understanding that, some of the more pliable metals, maybe only one cut and then you can bend it open. These cuts that they had to make two of them, one and basically cut it in half to be able to remove it. So understanding that, and then especially understanding the sensitive nature of the area, that you have to be very careful with, with making sure it's cool, and making sure that the metals isn't getting hot. Protecting the patient.
Chief, you mentioned some of the harder metals that you have to break. And I think I remember, is it tungsten? They like tungsten rings. They made a thing that you can put over top of it, and then you basically screw into it, and it like compresses it into like the housing.
Yep.
I think I saw one of the companies down here in Maryland. Like they crafted one of theirs like in the firehouse.
So there is a specific tool that will break a tungsten ring that jewelers and people like that will buy and have available. They're pretty pricey. They're really just specifically for tungsten rings, metal rings. We find that a pair of channel locks, and you clamp it down and then get another pair, or use a screwdriver if the screw at the end of the channel lock, without not having something to show you, but with this, that you could tighten down and adjust the opening of it. If you could crimp that down and tighten that down, that will give enough pressure. Again, titanium, tungsten rings rather, only need just enough pressure and they'll shatter, and they shatter in a bunch of pieces. Usually at least 2 or 3, and many times more. And so it's not, again, you could spend $300 or $200 and something on the ring breaker that a jeweler may have, and it's essentially the same thing. The difference is it's got a little diamond point on it, and you would crank it down on the ring as the band is around the ring, and it tighten it down, and that's its one use. That's the one thing that thing can do. All well and good, that's great, but I could do a lot of things with my vice grips, and I could use it for different things. And for $30, I can get a really good set of vice grips, probably 3 of them for $30. And if it has a knob to be able to tighten it, I can get an open ring, same gauge screw on it, so I can actually replace that with that, and then use a screwdriver for my torque, for my forces. If so you can get creative. I mean, firemen are pretty creative if you think about it and talk about it ahead of time. And hey, how if we had this, what can we do to make this good for us with what we have? I mean, if you have a specific ring cracker, that's great. That's $200, but that's the only thing that thing could do. It's 100%, designed specifically for tungsten rings, and there's quite a few people using tungsten rings. I doing this, I actually noticed that, they're not always necessarily tungsten if you see that they're black, but that probably black is going to be a tungsten ring. You can't always, that's not 100%, but that would lead me to, okay, it's not a gold ring, it's not a soft metal, then I have to cut. It's a harder shatter type break. So again, that's our philosophy. We don't, if you certainly you're welcome to buy a tungsten ring breaker, that's cool. But it's how many things do we have to carry to calls? I mean, you look at some of these compartments, there's like, oh my God, there's no more room in it. It's almost like you open the compartment and stuff falls out because there's that much stuff. And everything, we try to make our jobs easier, but sometimes we overthink it and buy the new widget, and because that's the best thing since sliced bread. But that other thing that used to work just as well does the same thing. It's just not that widget. So
I'm gonna jump in, Chief. I'm gonna put you on the spot a little bit. Well, obviously that's what we're trying to do anyway.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you have a lot of experience because I know with your connections in FDNY and then of course Boston, and Baltimore has this too, but Ocean City specifically has this because of its summer tourism. And I know, living along the coast like FDNY and Boston, there are amusement areas where I'm sure you guys have done a slew of training or have trained with individuals that have some knowledge of that. And that's a big one down in Ocean City in Maryland. And just out of curiosity, and again, I'm sorry for putting you on the spot, but we were talking about, a quick bag, some quick tools that would be relevant for certain situations. And in cases of that nature, which I know is always heavy on the minds of people in the department down in Ocean City, what do you think some quick go-tos that you've seen, from working with other guys, as far as maybe amusement rides, things of that nature, would be something that should be kind of kept on a rig and ready to pull off in any situation like that? Is there any off the top of your head that you can list? And I'm a keep it simple, stupid type of guy. I mean, so stupid that I couldn't even get that out, right? So it's all about keeping it really, really simple. And if there was a, let's say, 3 to 4 things that you should always carry with you in situations like those, as far as all the things that amusement areas offer, what do you think they would be?
Well, the amusement, specifically the amusement areas, a lot of times if they're in operation, which is probably the case, there's people there that know how to work them or put them together. If those are the traveling ones, they come apart in a week and they get put on a truck and they go to the next place. If they're stationary and they're moving, if they're already there and they're it's a permanent setup, then what you'll have is probably maintenance people that are pretty savvy about how they work and what they have and have to do maintenance on it. A lot of times I like to utilize their stuff, and it's not so much usually it's a no with ground ladders and things like that, but with something like this, their hand tools are specific to that ride or that attraction. If it's a weird corner that you need to take apart, or they're going to have that kind of wrench, specific socket size, the give you enough torque that the longest wrench that they have, they probably have that there. So we always like to tell try to utilize the people of knowledge that are there. They're going to help you out. They may not have the best ideas, but they'll have some ideas and be able to maybe point you in the right direction or give you some advice. It's still on you. You still have to make those decisions. So what would I be carrying? I'd carry an assortment of socket wrenches, of all different sizes. Doesn't mean you bring them to the scene right away, but have them available. The rescue that in my house, Rescue 2, they have a compartment and it's all hand tools. Box wrenches, screwdrivers, all sizes. None of that comes out in the man versus machine kit. Man versus machine kit should be looked at as, this is my first attack, my first quick hit. This is what I got. I can start doing something. And then you could start going back and say, hey, I need an 1.5 inch, box wrench, or I need something else, or I need torches, or I need other things. That's when you just start, requesting the specialty tools. They'll have our guys anyway have a 2-wheel dolly, and they'll just load up a couple things on it, and with their quick man and machine kit, depending on what they're going to do. And hey, we're going to, we might need some saws. Let's throw the saws on it. Right angle grinders are fabulous, underused tool, in my estimation. bandsaws, they just became a thing in the fire service. But contractors use those all the time, and I'm no contractor. I'm better at breaking things and making things, but certainly those guys, they know what tool works well, and you watch them work, and they use a bandsaw. And it's like, well, that would work pretty slick in some instances for us. It cuts really, really smooth. When you're talking, finite, real finesse kind of cutting that we have to do. That is something that, and it's nice, you can get into the debate of electric tools, corded tools versus battery operated tools. They've come a long way for battery operated tools. They're almost, you really, you asked me 10 years ago, I would have been balking at battery operated tools, because the power tools were just so much better. The batteries didn't last. When does the battery die? As soon as you start to use it. Is there a program on the fire department in that particular apparatus that keeps them charged? Are they on trickle charge? When is the last time they've been replaced? All those things. Nowadays, with all the different technology that we have now, the batteries are really come a long way. But it's nice to have both. You still, it's nice to have enough. But then again, how much can you put in the compartments? And then, and that's a discussion that you have to have. Is what are we going to, what do we need to make this happen? We have a support truck that will be dispatched on tech rescues. That the engine that's with us so the rescue has their things that they need daily. They're a heavy rescue. They, extrication, fire stuff, quick hit for any kind of confined space, rope rescue, things like that. But if we get into some really complicated things, the tech rescue is the one that's bringing all the extra stuff, the heavier, different tools, the different sizes of the bandsaws, for instance. Bring the assortment of things. So I think having an ancillary or a support truck goes a long way. And it's not manned. It's the engine throws two guys on it, and they go as a team together. We run with an officer and four. We run with an officer and three. So there's four guys on the truck. So two of them would get say on the engine, and two will go on the support truck. And if they finish the job, if they're returning and something comes in that it's an engine run, they all go. So it's not like you're taking them out of service or running, short or anything like that. But we're bringing more tools now to the incident, so we have more ability to reach in, and that's what we've found that works for us. I mean, everybody, the man between manning and space wise at firehouses and things like that, those all come into play as far as deciding how you want to distribute the equipment. But you can't have everything on one truck, because I feel it just becomes, you're trying to get you should have the right tools for most of the work you need. Those specialty tools, that's when you call in the cavalry. You get those extra tools coming to you. And that's why I'm a big proponent, and I think Mark is too, is a quick hit man in a machine kit. It's a couple feet, it's basically a tool kit, literally a tool kit, a couple of feet by 18 inches high. It's got the basic tools to get started. You need more stuff, you ask for the cavalry. I don't know, Mike, if that answers that question, but
Absolutely.
I think
it gets the wheels turning a little bit. Prepare a little bit better for some of the things that we have going on down here. So no, that's a wealth of knowledge. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chief.
I'm a
Yeah,
good
Chief,
fan.
I got a question for you.
Oh, sure.
And I'm just going to kind of go off of what Mike's talking about. So, in my experience has always been in smaller fire departments, combination fire departments, and so we definitely don't have staffed rescues per se. We have rescues in the
Mhm.
firehouses, but they're not actually staffed by people most of the time. And so we do have tools and things like that. It's funny you talk about the unique tools. I know in Ocean City we have a rebar breaker, and that's all that thing does.
Yeah.
And it takes up a case. It takes up like half a compartment to have it. You know, those types of things. So I've been kind of blessed in my history. I do metal work and stuff in my shop and done mechanical work and things like that. And so one of the things I found was when I would go to work at a firehouse, I never realized that some people didn't. And so I know, like I never forget it. We're doing training on just a continuing education training about cribbing a car up, and I was like, don't put it on suspension pieces because it's still going to move. You put it on the frame, and they get and these guys would keep messing up, and I was getting really frustrated. And then all of a sudden, when I started talking to them, like when they looked underneath of a car, it was just a bunch of metal. They didn't know what a suspension piece was versus a frame piece versus whatever. And so, in our small area, I guess this is just off of Mike's question, not just the tools that you carry in there, but taking vehicle rescue out, because I think everybody runs enough vehicle rescue to have a familiarity with that type of rescue. But in the unique rescue situations that you're talking about, what are like maybe the 3 or 4 things that you think that our guys on the engines and the trucks and stuff should train or be aware of a proficiency that you would recommend that we kind of get our people trained up on for those initial incidents when they're doing that very first walking in with that man versus machine bag? What do you think the things that they should focus on training outside of vehicle rescue?
Sorry. I think we got that vehicle education dialed down. Not something that we should not train on. That's not what I'm saying. But I think some the things that we because man versus machine, a vehicle car accident is a man and a machine versus together. I mean, we're really working. It is really truly a man versus machine kind of thing. But I think in that respect, I think we got that down. Hydraulic tools have been around for a long time. That seems to be that's one of those things that we tend to do a lot of work on. We get a lot of calls. We get, that's a familiar thing. I think when we get involved in those weird stuff, the auger calls, the things that people get wrapped up in, that's when you start having to think. So to answer your question, some of the tools, I'm not a real big fan of torches, although I think they have their application. But I think a lot of things, if you think about torches operating in our scenario, in man versus machine, they generate quite a bit of heat. So I'm not saying I shouldn't say I'm not a fan. It has its place for sure. I think we should be proficient with it. But we've gotten away from the acetylene, and now we're more into the petrogen. It's more reliable, less probability of
Flag.
Yeah. And I think so. I think being on the top of the game with the petrogen is important. I think understanding what a right angle grinder can do for you, whether it's cutting the bolts off, and I'm thinking more on the lines of a auger type incident, cutting the bolts off, understanding. But unfortunately, I think a lot of I see some gray hair, right? So Bobby but so we probably had shop class in high school without guards on them, without big band saws with and it was just like nobody was paying attention, nobody and if you had a shop teacher that wasn't missing a finger, then he wasn't that good at what he was doing. And but nowadays that's not in existence. So we're getting a lot of firefighters that are not exposed to that at all. They don't know how to start saws. They don't know how to manipulate tools. They don't understand what what a wrench even does or which way it goes. Oh, and I'm, certainly being sarcastic with that, but I think the basic tools is what we have to be proficient in. Understanding what, every action's a reaction, right? What will happen if I release a spring? Where is it going to go? I have to capture that. I have to think about those kind of things. So right angle grinders are important. Dremel tools. We'll use a Dremel tool, and you tell them to start slow, use water, and they're all over the place. And I'm, as an instructor, I'm like, just, and they want to pull out the K12, and I'm like, whoa, let's start small. So again, it's some of the basic, and maybe for us, a Dremel tool is pretty basic, and it should be almost like but I've found that doing these classes, you got to start from scratch. So this is how you change the blade. This is how you start it. And this is, maybe not literally this is you plug it in, but I mean, you really you can't assume that everybody knows and has a lot of experience with these tools. For instance, the bandsaw. A lot of people haven't never seen, and I admittedly had never used a bandsaw until I started this rescue stuff. I never had it, other than a bandsaw that in shop where it was, 6 feet tall and, stationary, never a hand bandsaw or anything like that. Understanding that, I need to start the saw, I can feather it and things like that. So I think we take for granted that our people know exactly what these tools do and what they can and can't do, and then what to do if they troubleshoot. What happens if that bandsaw, the blade comes apart, comes off the rollers? Are they able to replace the blade on the fly? They can troubleshoot it or anything like that. And then just making sure that the tools are where they should be. And again, we don't use things like reversible pliers. That you could get the use of brake pads or brake springs and things like that. But the reversible pliers, that sometimes you get, if it's been a long time since I've replaced any kind of brakes, but that was something that was just, yeah, you did it right. Now, what do you mean reversible pliers? What? And you could utilize them as a spreading device after you make your cut on a gold ring or a soft metal ring, and spread it out just enough. And again, you only have to move it just enough to be able to get it over the knuckle or the swelling of the finger, as an example. So again, I really feel like sometimes it's the basic tools, and we take for granted that everybody knows what those things are. And I see it more than not. We do 200 and so people in each day, 50 in each of the sessions, 200 total about in FDIC for the HOT program. And it's a 4-hour program, morning and night, morning and afternoon. And so we do about 200 people. And I see a lot of blank stares with, if I talk about a right angle grinder or a bandsaw or anything like that. And it's not their fault. I'm not finding fault. It's just, that's not they haven't experienced that. And, people have all different levels of experience, and you can't just assume that, oh, you're on the rescue or you're on a truck or an engine, you're going to know that. So when you get into something like these, we take it, yeah, you're probably great at stretching a line and everything like that. But when it comes down to understanding what a bandsaw or a Dremel or any of those, finite tools that we don't use very often, may not happen.
Chief, we a couple of things. One, we're coming up on our hour, but there's a great question from in the comment section. And what are your thoughts on the lockout tag out? The comment, and here, let me put it up real quick.
Oh,
heard about if you turn the power off, the machine might still move. the gears or the augers moving back to a neutral position, further entangling the victim. So what's been your experience, and what are your thoughts on that?
So my answer to that is what I said earlier, which was find the people who know how to use the machine. Exactly. We were up in Maine as an example, and I'll get more into that specific question, but we were up in Maine and at a paper company, and these guys, work on the huge, they take up a whole house of these paper mills, and there's a bunch of sharp things in it and a bunch of moving parts and whatnot. And it was, we were talking about lockout tagout, and I said, well, how would you lock this out? I said, there's a switch right there. I said, I bet you that's not the only one. And he said, no, you're right. He says, that will shut down the lights. That doesn't that shuts down the rollers. That doesn't shut down the heaters to it or anything else. And then there's the steam energy part of it that you have to shut down. So it could be a bunch of different things. But the people that are there will probably be able to tell you. It's like, hey, if you shut this off, it may go to neutral. It may come down, or it may continue in its cycle coming down. Even when you go to turn it back on, thinking that it's going to reverse up, it may continue its cycle down before it comes up. So those are the things that you need to understand and be able to ask. It's like, hey, what will happen? And hopefully it's been shut down, but if you turn off the power, what will happen then? So I know people don't like to hear this, and in car accidents, I sometimes say, well, maybe we should move the seat back, the electric seats back, before we actually disconnect the power, right? And that's sticking one hand in there if you can reach it. And that's, I'm not saying not disconnect the power. That's not what I'm saying. All I'm saying is that by disconnecting the power, we lose that option to be able to move the seat back if it's still working. And maybe sometimes we overthink it. It's never 100% in anything the fire service does. Maybe we pause a second, move the seat back, shut the power down, and then do what we got to do, making it safe. Same with the machines. If you discuss it with the mechanic that might be there, or the person that might be there, and it may be the maintenance guy, the guy that knows that machine, he's the one that's stuck in the machine. He might not be able to help you. If he's conscious, maybe he can, but maybe he's not able to help us. And then you'll have to use your best judgment. But I haven't seen too many incidents. I have never heard of an incident, and that's from my experience, that the machine will move after it's shut down or power is taken away. It's my understanding that the power, once it's removed, it stays wherever it stopped. And once the power is removed, it doesn't go to neutral, doesn't do anything else. It just stays where it is. Now, with that being said, there may be exceptions to that. And this is why a pre-incident walkthrough, just trying to find out more information about certain manufacturing sites, asking those kind of questions. What happens when I shut this down? What is it going to do? OSHA, pretty much, if it's an OSHA state, and if they are, of course, it's an OSHA, even if it's OSHA compliant, doesn't mean that they are compliant, because that's why we get involved, right? Whether it's human nature, right? So they are trying OSHA, and those safety type systems are all trying to prevent injuries. But with that being said, that if a shutoff is hit, it generally shuts it off and stops it wherever it's at. And shutting the power down, it shouldn't do no more or no less movement than shutting it down.
Chief, in interest of a future, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
In interest of maybe a future conversation or a future podcast, and I know that this is kind of going off in the left field a little bit. But being, a fellow truck boss or truckie, have you looked into any of the little nuances of solar panels as far as, and I know that that's not, I guess, not necessarily man versus machine, but there's definitely some applications for it there. Is there, has that discussion ever occurred?
In what respect, as far as
Just some of the different systems that are attached to them, and of course, my mind got on it because we were discussing shutting something off and having that power source completely gone, and I know that that's an issue with those solar panels, and of course,
Yeah.
a systematic removal of them in order to gain access to different areas, if, as far as vertical vent goes and things like that. But again, I know that that's kind of a shot in the dark. I just didn't know if that discussion had come up as far as man versus machine.
Well, typically we might not. I haven't heard or seen or can think of anybody being trapped in a solar panel or a solar array. But they're a little different animal because they do still discharge power, even though that we shut it off. Lights, headlights or street lights will generate some amperage, as I understand it. So that's a little different animal. And my thing has always been, we're finding more and more of them, and that's just going to be, we're going to have more and more of them. We just have to not vent on the side that the panels are. We have to stay away from them, considering them live all the time. And if it's not the best place to vent, it's not worth risking somebody getting shocked or hurt by them.
I know I'm off subject, but I just wanted to tap you a little bit on it.
Yeah, no, people ask, and we had a fire, probably in December, maybe. I think it was before Christmas, right around Christmas time. And we had, it required, there was the solar panels on it. And, we couldn't put our aerials up. We had to use ground ladders because the aerial would have been right over the solar panels, and they were throwing a ladder, and I had to stop them. I was like, no, we'll throw ground ladders. That's you got to stay away from them, and I was, I shut the panels on the outside. I was like, we can't trust them. They're always going to be generating power. They're always going to be, you have to consider them alive all the time. There's a really good YouTube video that our fire department at Boston had, that they gave through our training system. And I forget who it was, the guy out of, I want to say Texas. But he was, they were very good with explaining how solar arrays work, and, how they work, and understanding that they basically could always be some sort of amperage coming from them, even if we shut them down. So they're a little different animal than a machine, I think. Going back to the machine, some people have suggested that, not only do we shut the breaker down, but we also cut the cables. I'm really not fuzzy about that. The machine should be shut down. At some point, there should be some indications that it is truly shut down. The lights go off. The system is dead. I mean, there's also maybe the ability to check the power. I mean, but at some point you got to say, we shut it down. We locked out and tagged out, which is very important. We have to do it. I mean, like that. But do we really truly know it's 100% shut down? Is it being fed from another direction? Did we just shut the power down and the rollers are still going? And again, this is that pre-incident walkthroughs, and get as much information about one of that manufacturing plant or that machine that you're like not warm and fuzzy about, having some intel on it and put it into whatever your incident system, whatever your CAD system or whatever you're using for incident information, pass that along, whether it's at fire alarm or your dispatchers or it's on the piece or whatever, but have that information be available and disseminated. Because it's not going to be your group that did the walkthrough that has an incident. It's going to be the other group that didn't go and that doesn't care, because that's usually how it happens. But having that information at 123 Main Street, they have this big badass machine that you can't shut off just by hitting the breaker on the outside. There's several different places.
All right, guys. We're, like I said a little bit ago, we're just over an hour. So with all of this, and from the part that I was able to catch, what a great conversation. And I love, and Trevor and Chief Nichols and I talked about this in the pre-show, is how do we make this more applicable for that first arriving engine, the first arriving piece, to at least get the process started. Do you have someone, entrapped in a machine, and how do those first arriving people that may not have that training, get the process started to, make sure we get the incident going in the right direction. And I would imagine it's very similar to, Trevor saying, as the saying goes, that first line sets the tone, the first engine sets the tone for the rest of the fire. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get some closing thoughts. And we'll kick it down to Mike and Bobby, and then we'll come up to Chief Nichols and Trevor, and then we'll wrap it up. So you guys can fight it out down there.
I'll let Bobby go first. I chewed up a lot of time.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, Chief, I want to say thank you. I've been interested in this for a while, and I've actually had a lot of guys come forward and discuss trying to get a man versus machine class down in Ocean City. And I know a lot of the preliminary thought was, what do we even prep with? Prior to holding a class here, how can we, what progressive thinking can we put forth, to pseudo prepare for something? So you answered all those questions for us, of course, and I really appreciate it. And there's a lot more I'd love to know about all this. So hopefully we can reach out to you in the very near future. I appreciate you coming on. Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And thank you, Chief, for coming on. I really appreciate it. I know we really enjoyed when you had the class in Ocean City that Trevor was talking about. Mark and Jimmy Payne were down here for that. I think those two guys taught that one. And there was a guy from the police ESU that was teaching you guys. He's still with you guys. I can't remember his name. Is he still with you guys?
Randy Miller. Yeah, he is. Yep, he retired from the police. So.
Yeah, the Mets medic, I call him.
Yeah.
So thank you very much. I mean, and I think we've always tried in Ocean City just to, because people aren't familiar with tools, and I work with metal a lot, so we do a lot of just cutting stations, how much heat transfers when you're using a cutting torch or a saw or a right angle grinder or, or a bandsaw. But we also got to the point where we started to teach about where bandsaws don't fit, where they just don't work. I mean, the bandsaws are great, but I have in my shop, I got an automatic one that chops the metal for me all by itself. But a lot of times they can't fit where you want to get them because they're kind of a little bulky sometimes, So it's really good to listen to you and hear what's going on. And we certainly we'd like to see you again. And I really want to just say, send our thoughts out to our brothers and sisters in Ukraine. Every time a bomb drops, the fire department's going. And I think they've got a lot of coverage over there. Their fire departments, they're very, very thinly spread out. And so I give a cheers to those guys and girls for all they're doing for their country. And it's great to have you, Chief. It's been a pleasure. I met you a very long time ago. We never really talked a whole lot, but we both had darker and more hair. That's all I remember.
Yep, that's right.
Thanks, Bobby. And to your point, I think that the best place to start is with the basics. I know that sounds a little bit contrite, but as Chief Nichols was saying, a lot of people now in our industry don't come from the trades like they used to. They're very tech savvy. They're smart. They're motivated. They got a lot of stuff going on. but there's no app on the cell phone for cutting certain things. Or I mean, I know there's some resources there, but even in my own department where I have a very young workforce on a regular rotation, we're literally going back to the basics and saying, here's how to use a socket set. Here's how to use an impact wrench. Here's how to use a box wrench. And we're not trying to insult these people whatsoever, but a lot of them just don't have that hands-on experience. And we're trying to put that in their hands where, like you said, Bobby, we'll set up different stations for them. And one of our, I think, drawbacks in the fire service is, look, is a socket set sexy compared to a Hearst tool and an O cutter? No, yeah, everyone wants to get the big tool and cut stuff up and do the Tim Taylor, more power. That's great, but they don't understand the capabilities and limitations of what they have, or better yet, those basic hand tools, and then also just the basic knowledge of materials. What materials do you fracture? What materials do you cut? What materials do you grind? And they might take a big tool to the wrong material, thinking it's going to work. So to that end, I think starting with the basics, regardless of the size and scope of your department, is kind of going back and reviewing some of that stuff. And like Patty was saying, a lot of the wisdom's in the trenches. The guy who maintains that machine, every freaking day of the week and the year, has a lot of requisite knowledge of what that machine does and doesn't do. They have the stuff on site. We actually trained with Jolly Roger and Tripper's Rides. Those are two of the bigger amusement places in Ocean City. The cool side effect of that was not only did we learn how to dismantle some of the rides, and Bobby, you'd appreciate this, is when Alan Schweitzer was still alive and well among us. And after we got done, they're like, hey, you guys want to ride these rides? So it's awesome to have your freaking crew down there just going on amusement rides, and then you're getting paid to do it. It's a pretty sweet gig. But to that end, it's really good stuff. But I do have to agree completely that we really have to look outside of our own blinders. I'll tell you a really very, very, very quick story about this. A lot of times we kind of catch that attitude that we're the fire department, we're the saviors of everything. And look, we do a lot of really cool and interesting shit. There's no doubt about that. But when I was a younger officer, I went on an elevator call. Not a big deal. We go on elevator calls all the time. Passenger inconvenience. It wasn't an actual it wasn't an elevator mechanic trapped or pinned or anything else. It was a passenger inconvenience call. The call was much more complex. It turned out to be much more complex than the level of training that we had received at that time and our capabilities. But of course, I had that little butter bar on my collar. So the fairy dust, they came and sprinkled stuff on my collar and said, I'm supposed to know it all, right? Well, and you guys in Ocean City will appreciate this. I have my August attitude. It's towards the end of August where, we just had our, just beat down, and we couldn't get these people out of the elevator company was an hour and 15 minutes away. And again, it was just more complex. All the normal stuff that we would do at that period of time, this is years ago, wasn't working. So I was getting a little bit frustrated, but of course, having to be the duck where you're cool and calm on the surface, but underneath the water, your feet are going like this. Anyway, guy comes up to me. He's got his red Solo cup. He said, hey buddy, can I give you a hand? No, sir. Fire department. I wasn't that rude to him, but basically I dismissed him outright. He walks away, comes back about 10 minutes later. Hey buddy, look, I'm not trying to pester you, but you really seem to be having a difficult time with this elevator door. Is there anything I do to help you? And I in a little bit more of an assertive tone, sir, thank you for, I appreciate what you're trying to say, so forth and so on. We got this. Elevator company's on the way. Dismissed him again. Third time, about 10 minutes later, the guy just couldn't take it anymore. He's like, hey buddy, look, I'm really not trying to get underneath your skin, but I can help you with this. And of course, at that time, I'm like, well, what are you, an elevator mechanic? Yep. So within literally within, I'd say 60 to 90 seconds, he had the people out of the freaking elevator. Yeah. And after I scooped up my pride and my attitude off the floor, I took him aside. I said, sir, I have, number one, I thanked him profusely. Number two, I said, look, I have my August attitude. Here's Ocean City Fire Department in a nutshell, because everybody is somebody from somewhere starting in June. And, but it was one of those things where the guy couldn't have been any nicer, any more gracious, and even though I had actually worn my own ass as a hat in that situation, I learned more in 5 minutes from that guy than I had at that point in my career about anything in elevators. So, Chief Nichols, to your point, the wisdom is definitely in the trenches, and sometimes we have to get over ourselves in order to make sure that we have a successful outcome to these incidents. But Chief Nichols, I do want to thank you so much for coming on and sharing these nuggets with us and your wisdom. I know in 2 weeks we're going to be celebrating the high holiday, so Sláinte.
Yes.
In advance.
Yep.
And with that, Ben, I'm going to kick it. Actually, Chief, I'm going to kick it over to you for some final words, and then Ben, you can take us home.
Well, I appreciate you guys having me on. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. It was. I will end my thoughts here with keep it simple, silly, right? Don't overcomplicate what we're trying to do. Because you have a lot of knowledge on every rig. You just have to find it and get it focused in the right direction. As an example, the FEMA team is I go out with 6 to 8 people, sometimes 9, and I turn to one guy and I'm like, no, you're not touching the wood. No, you're not. But I'm going to go to the other guy who builds houses, and he on the side, and I'm going to have him. But the guy that wasn't building wood could tie, the Empire State Building and hang it, and lift it. You know what I mean? So you get the right people in the right focused into the right directions, and those are the people that you use and utilize for their knowledge. Like Bobby, you work with metal all the time. I'd be looking at you. Hey, you're my metal guy. If I come across with something like that I could tap your knowledge. But I think we try to keep the class, and it's not dumbing down the class or anything like that. I don't mean it that way, but we try to keep it simple. Most of the time, we can accomplish what we got to do without overcomplicating the whole thing. We're firemen. We tend to do that already. So if we can just, direct the attention and try to and solve the problem without overcomplicating it. And one last real quick story. 2 or 3 years ago, went to a person with their hand stuck in a snowblower. Happens. Why people do that, but that's why we're in business, I guess. And it was as simple as, if you looked at it, his hand was in the chute. It was a wet, snowy day. Hand got in. The motor stalled, but it had enough torsion on the auger that once he released it, it moved. Got his fingers caught. It was as easy as removing the spark plug and taking the compression off the engine, because how much do you have to move it? Just enough. Out it came. He took his gloves off. He passed out. That's essentially what happened. He had some ugly looking fingers, but he was going to survive. He's had all his digits. He just, just wasn't very smart with what he was trying to do. But, again, don't overcomplicate it. That is what I would say. But thanks again for having me, gentlemen. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Again, thanks for joining us. Again, we talked in the pre-show about getting some pictures. We'll figure out the technology to get that, and maybe we'll do a part 2. Not in 2 weeks. We'll push it back after that. Again, that's the high holiday.
Yeah.
I know you mentioned teaching hot classes at FDIC. Are you guys out there again this coming year?
Yep.
Awesome.
Man and machine. Yep.
Awesome. So anybody that's watching or listening after this, because tomorrow this will go out as a podcast. If you guys are interested, or if you're listening and like I said, you're interested, Chief Nichols is actually a founding member of the PL Vulcan training. So if you guys are interested, check that out. If you have problems getting to that, or if you want to get up with Chief Nichols, you can always go through Strike the Box. We're more than happy to help get up with that and facilitate some training. If you're going to FDIC, make sure you guys check their hot class out for the man versus machine. Guaranteed to be some more good stuff. In 2 weeks, again, it's St. Patty's Day. We're still working on what we're going to do that evening, but I guarantee it'll be a great show. We might even remember some of it the next day. So,
is this going to be a
with that being
pre-recorded one,
said,
Ben? Is that going to be a pre-recorded one like the rest of the holidays?
we're going to have to talk about that.
I might recommend it.
So, with that being said, thanks for joining us. I hope everybody has a great evening and stay safe. And we will see you guys next time.
Okay. Sláinte.